Let me go back. The generation that I was raised in was beginning to forget history because of postmodernism.
Yep.
But the moment it matured to the place where all of a sudden there are no absolutes and we throw out history, the following generation discarded all of history and disdained it. Deconstruction happened in such a way that your generation took the brunt of it.
Mhm.
So there is already a preconceived idea. Anything that happened before me, even though I can't get to where I am with what happened before me, is really of no consequence. So many of the leaders dismissed it all and forgot to mention, but I wouldn't be here without them. And so if I said something to you today about William Seymour that you didn't know, the question becomes, how come you weren't taught that?
Mhm.
How come you didn't know? How come you don't know about the early Pentecostals and the persecution they went through? How come you don't know about the racial divide and how the early Pentecostal movement spoke to the marginalized? And I would argue it's because the people that have led us devalued the significance of that, because when they saw the excesses or what they perceive were excesses, they threw out the baby with the bathwater. And I'm simply saying that we can't move forward until we recollect everything from our past that we've discarded. You cannot honor the future if you fail to honor the past, which means if you don't know where you come from, you're not going to know where you belong right now, which means you can't move forward because you are identified with the people you're a part of. And when you either going to have to say, we're not Pentecostals, we disavow all relationship with them, and therefore we identify with this tribe. But you're going to find out, you hang out with that tribe long enough, they've got their own fruits, flakes, and nuts too. They just don't talk in tongues.
I
There
agree
are
with you.
dysfunctional people everywhere. There are traumatized people everywhere. There are broken people everywhere.
Mhm.
There is no perfect church. It's a perfected church that's perfected over the course of the long journey, because all of us are on the road to Emmaus, and all of us don't have a clue who Jesus is most of the time until he opens our hearts and minds to understand the scriptures and teaches us how to see him there. That's the reality.
Yeah, I definitely don't denigrate Pentecostalism. I want to be really clear about that. Um, I mean,
Okay, all right, and
I have.
I'm not
I
this is
have in times in my life, but I've come back around.
yeah.
what I'm saying is that if we forget history,
Mhm.
where do we go? If I forget where I came from, can I really say I am here? If here is the result of where things have been
Mhm.
that long preceded my arrival here, I'm not the first generation that ever came along. And then what do I do about the here for the Pentecostals of 1906? They have their roots in Wesleyan pietism. And where does Wesley emerge from?
Mhm.
And then you got to go all the way back, because the tradition we're in ultimately is designed to tie us back to the ultimate tradition we came from.
This is really good. I think to answer your question, where I'm at right now is I'm trying to study the tree, and I haven't yet gotten to the point of zeroing in on some of the leaves. And so, as not only were and this is not everybody's experience. This is just my experience, and Mike's probably a bit too. It's not that I just didn't grow up getting informed about Pentecostal history. I didn't grow up getting really informed about church history,
Mhm.
and so that's where I'm at. Is I'm still looking at that tree, and at some point, I'm gonna need to start zeroing in on the leaves that are hanging out on my branch. And I will and I'll
So then the question becomes, do I know where to start? See, because
well,
one of the things that happens in formal structured education, if it's really good, is that we don't start with, I'm going to teach you how to cast out a devil. It's,
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you the story of Jesus from Genesis to Malachi. And I'm going to show you that connecting the dots isn't about a system of theology or dogma. It's about telling the story faithfully.
Mhm.
So if I said, could you tell the story of the scripture in 3 minutes and tell the whole story? Do you know the whole story well enough to tell me the entire scripture in 3 minutes or less?
I
Chances are
think
you
so.
can. Chances are you
Yeah.
can. Most
I would
preachers.
I would hope so.
I think you can. I definitely think you can. I wouldn't doubt that for the moment. But I would tell you that most of your generation that is on social media,
Mhm.
what they think the gospel is, has nothing to do with what they're saying.
Well, let me just put this out there and you can tell me if I would have been able to or not. When you ask me that question, what I go to in my head is basically a Michael Heiser approach. I would recount to you something similar to what he lays out in uh I think it's his latest book, The Unseen Realm. I would recount something similar
Not
to
his
that.
latest book. It's one of his many, but it's not his
Yeah.
latest book.
Is that what you mean in
No,
terms of the story?
no.
So what do you mean by that?
When your children ask you, what do these things mean? What would you tell them? So if the story is condensed in a verse, Christ died for you according to the scriptures,
Mhm.
was buried and rose again according to the scriptures, and I got to leave in like 2 minutes. When they offered their first fruits in the land and they brought them before the priest and the high priest, they had to tell a story.
Mhm.
My father was a wandering Aramean. Starts right there. Who's the father that's the wandering Aramean?
Abraham.
You've got to be able to tell the story of Abraham all the way to Jesus in 3 minutes or less and cover the whole span of the flow of biblical history in a way that a 5-year-old could understand it.
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But many cannot. Many cannot. And that's sad. So it's not enough to not just know church history. We don't even know the scriptures. We know our few key verses where we preach our hot sermons, but really knowing how to do faithful pastoral theology, wrestling with the text, finding Christ in the text, and learning how to feed the people with Christ from the text,
Mhm.
that's the work of a poimen, a shepherd.
Mhm.
And that's something that desperately needs to be recovered. And I want to recover that from a Pentecostal perspective, because it's been the tradition that has shaped and formed me.